I'm not sure what kind of questions any of you would have. I can tell you this, and this is what really, 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 really concerns me, is that Chad was threatened before I ever left his home. He made a phone call to Kim Mann, pulled her out of court to discuss my case. He said, "Why did you send your key witness to prison?" He had read the Register of Actions and saw that they had forgot to flag the file that Beasley was a PRR, repeat offender. He got 30 years probation. I assisted in establishing his probation violations. I didn't know him when he caught that charge. I didn't know him until he moved to Pensacola after he got the 30 years probation, which Chad said was completely illegal for them to have even done that with all the motions they had filed. The original prosecutor was Ryan J. Vesia, who filed the original charges. Beasley was charged originally with child molestation, possession of child porn. Chad said they didn't flag the file. They switched prosecutors, and then Beasley was released with 30 years probation on a GPS and ankle monitor, and was allowed to even though he had reoffended in Missouri, in Bolivar, Missouri, while he was ROR'd, and then reoffended in Pensacola while he was under supervision. What led to that arrest was my wife and I had moved to Pensacola to assist in the BP oil spill cleanup. A Navy propulsions engineer, me being the daughter of a naval intelligence person, Beasley was a Navy, he had been dishonorably discharged from the Navy for violence against his commanding officer. A Navy man told me about what Beasley was up to and said I should move in and keep an eye on him. And that's what I did. I wasn't an agent of any police agency at the original time I moved in, and what's more, he'd already pled guilty to charges, and according to his sex offender probation specialist at the Department of Corrections, he was not entitled to a fair and impartial hearing because he'd already pled guilty. Judge Alice Blackwell White gave him one, but I can tell you I was arrested off the witness stand on an old grand theft charge from 2002. This is significant because in 2002 I had been put on Neurontin by the University of Missouri doctors, had my medical records falsified. They made false criminal allegations for the purpose of pushing Neurontin for kickbacks. My primary care provider, Beth Sweeney, a nurse practitioner at University of Missouri Teaching Facility Family Health Center. Fast forward to 2014. She said, "Yep, I remember they were pushing that really hard." And so did her nurse. And she examined the scars from 2 tib-fib compound fractures. Where 2 titanium rods were placed, I contracted a MRSA, systemic MRSA that I fought with truckloads of vancomycin for years, till finally a nurse in Bay County said, "You need to watch the court TV because my husband is suing Pfizer because it made him suicidal." The Washington Post, eventually a whistleblower came out from Pfizer, kind of like Jeffrey Wygant and Big Tobacco, came out and said they knew that it caused suicide and suicidal ideations. I believe the body count that reported was about 6 million people. And also there was allegations of medical abuse at a CCI, a private prison facility, in regards to my charges where they housed me. I was released at one point on medical leave, medical emergency. They had had 2 deaths at CCI in Bay County in 2003, 2004. And I was basically listed as a fugitive from the Florida Department of Corrections. My wife had been a former corrections officer for them. Her brother was still a lieutenant, and they both advised me not to turn myself in because I would be killed. They knew I was sick. They knew I was dying of MRSA. Eventually, I developed cancer, uterine cancer. I had serious symptoms prior to us moving to Pensacola in 2010. And you can have uterine cancer for years and never develop a tumor. When you have uterine cancer, your uterus swells up and encroaches on a nerve that can cause pain throughout your back, throughout your privates, and cause paralysis in the legs. And I fell several times while I was in prison, prior to that as well. When I got out of prison in 2013, I immediately went back to Orlando to figure out what the hell happened. I met Chad, and Chad said, you weren't supposed to have gone. That warrant was so old, and you were a no new charges arrest. They sent you to prison on a 9-year-old felony that you weren't supposed to even have as a felony, because what Chad said that the original amount was below the felony amount, so they added the tax to make it go above the requirements for felony. Now, I stole DVDs to pay for the Neurontin because the University of Missouri doctors said, if you don't take this, you're going to, they used to threaten wrongful incarceration at Missouri, what's now called Missouri Psychiatric Center, if I didn't take my Neurontin. The Neurontin was actually what was causing the suicidal tendencies and ideation. Plus, I was autistic. They also gave me a false diagnosis of borderline personality disorder and bipolar. A whistleblower, that was 2000, that was 1998 through 2002. Fast forward to 2014, a whistleblower nurse said they give that to 80% of their patients. It only affects 2% of the population. Chad and I researched that diagnosis, and he lived with me for 5 months. He says, I'm not seeing it. 2 specialists that were brought into Orlando Regional Medical Center said they didn't see either bipolar or BPD, borderline personality, and they probably suspected it was fraudulent diagnosis for purposes of pushing patented drugs for kickbacks. My real diagnosis is autism, Asperger's, with savant capabilities, which means my genius is so rapid that you can't time it. Prodigious savant means you do things with your savant capabilities that nobody else in the world could do. I can establish that via reasonable deductions, public records, rapid authentication or vetting for anyone who wants me to do that. And you can actually see that in some of those emails. The work that Chad trained me for, he wanted me to be his dream investigator, led to my exposing this healthcare alliance that apparently goes at least from St. Louis, Missouri to San Francisco. All are tax-exempt non-for-profits, or there are some that are or regular corporate that bought the tax-exempt non-for-profits. I definitely established that Governor Nixon used his public office to make, and Attorney General Chris Koster, via my phone calls and emails to them, they made sure there was no oversight on the Medicaid fraud at those health systems that they were affiliated with. I went to Florida, a University of Missouri alumni. He apparently graduated Northwest Missouri State University in Kirksville, which is now AG Still, or AS Still, or whatever it's called, which is now a University of Missouri, or Mizzou, satellite campus. It's part of the University of Missouri Health Systems, or University of Missouri Systems. He came into my room at ORMC, and he falsely asserted that he could tell from an MRI if a mass was malignant or not. They ordered an ultrasound. The ultrasound showed a whole bunch of new cystic structures, very large, that formed very rapidly per MU radiology reports that were taken just months earlier. And it showed free fluid in the cul-de-sac, which was indicative of a rupture. They didn't tell me any of this. They came in the room and said, didn't tell me any of this. They didn't tell me I was going septic. They did a heart cath. They did 2 different stress tests. Both showed I was having myocardial infarctions, heart attacks. Anyway, this MU graduate, Terry Haig, Dr. Terry Haig at GYN, came into the room and said he would not do any biopsy. He would do an arterial embolation if the MRI revealed any evidence of cancer. He did this in front of nurses but didn't sign his name, and he said that he was going to make sure that no other GYN gave me a second opinion. And then he wrote that in the medical records. And then said that he called all of them, and they assured him that they would stand by his medical opinion. You can't coerce or intimidate any patient into not seeking a second opinion. The nurses said, first of all, you can't tell from an MRI if something's malignant or not. You go by symptoms. I also had large black lesions down there, private area. I now have one on my arm from internal bleeding from an intravenous catheter for the purposes of drawing blood. That was 4 months ago. Now it's turned black, and it's still very painful. That's how I found the lesions down there in the first place. It hurt very bad to set. It was like, what's really going on? And I looked, and there was all this blackening, and it was very painful. So I was threatened at ORMC Hospital. My friend Ruby Farrar came up. Protective Services got involved, and they basically admitted in front of the Protective Services investigator that they lied to me. First, they lied to me and said the heart stress tests were normal when they were not, and that they were discharging me. Then they discharged me in a state of sepsis. I was readmitted the same day through the ER at Florida Hospital. Then I was threatened there, and the nurses there wrote their names down. I immediately emailed Chad and I said I have to quit as your agent because of a possible conflict of interest, and this was terrorist activities by known Klan associations. The Mizzou Klan is famous in a book called Rebels on the Border that associate themselves with the University of Missouri in Columbia. The book is actually about Little Dixie, Columbia, where the area I came from, in the area where this doctor comes from. Unfortunately, Dr. Terry Haig did not sign his name as the writer or as the examiner or creator of the medical records in my medical records at ORMC. A physician's assistant signed her name as the one who made these decisions. So this is the second video, and I'll move on to the third.